In this tutorial, you'll learn how to track your footage, create a point cloud map that then generates geometry off of that, and reproject your footage back onto it for a pretty advanced paint out. And what we're going to do is we're going to paint out a tattoo on this leg, and then we're going to reproject a new tattoo on it. We're going to use the paint out to add texture to our new tattoo and try to make it look as realistic as possible. We're going to do that with Blackmagic Fusion 20, and I go into Affinity to do any of the paint out work, using everything that's available for free in the new Affinity software. All of the assets for this project are going to be in the description. You're going to get the final node flow that you can use as reference. With this being a little bit more of a complicated node flow, I want to make sure you have the final file so that you can reference and figure out if something goes wrong, that you can go back and look at it, and as well as the footage. And if you don't want to worry about going into Affinity, what I did today in Affinity you can do with the free version. You don't need Canva Pro, so you should be able to download Affinity as well and follow along. But if you don't want to, you have access to the still frames that I did create. I'll include the logo as well, so you'll have everything you need to follow along. You won't need to use any of your own footage or assets, and you'll have access to the final comp so that you can figure things out as needed. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a magic mask to rotor out the legs and isolate it. So I'm going to go to the very first or last frame. Let's go to the first frame, and then I'm just going to start selecting just the leg. Just keep clicking until you get the leg isolated off of the background. Okay, that's actually going to work for me. I'm not worried about the knee pad. In fact, I'm just going to hold Alt and make sure that's excluded, and then I'm also going to exclude anything from the background as well. Okay, we're going to keep this on fast because we just want like a hard edge on this roto, just to make sure it's isolated. So from there on, we're at the first frame, we're going to track forwards. And once that is done, we now have our legs rotored out from the background. The next thing we're going to do is create a bitmap node, and then we're going to pipe this in. It's going to give us a black and white matte. This is going to act as a matte for our camera tracker. Add a camera tracker node. We're going to pipe our footage into it, and then we're going to take our bitmap and add it in as a mask. So in our camera tracker, we are going to preview auto track locations. We're going to adjust the detection threshold and minimum feature spacing and try to give us as many features as we can to track. So I'm going to turn this low and turn the minimum low as well. We're aiming to just get as much detail as we can on this leg. And it's mostly focused on the tattoo, which is perfect. So yeah, I'm going to set this to about, we'll just round it up to 1.9. And then I'm going to leave this at the 0.0227. I'm going to check bidirectional tracking, and then I'm going to auto track. Okay, now that's done, let's go to the Solve tab. And let's click Solve. Cool. It's a solid solve error for what we're doing. We've got about 0.8. But we're not worrying about camera tracking right now. We're just using this to build out data to create a 3D mesh. So now I'm going to add a merge 3D. We have two outputs on this camera tracker. This one's the image output, and then this is the scene output. So I'm going to take the scene output and put it into the merge 3D. If we preview that, this will give us a representation of what our points are looking like. And so now we want to go in and actually start, we want to delete anything that isn't on the face of this leg here. So we have all these stray points over here that I'm going to go and select and delete. I'm going to look sideways here, try to get all of them as much as I can in one go. We really only want to worry about the ones facing on the front of the leg. So I'm going to select these, hit delete. I've got a couple stray ones here in the front. I'm also going to select those. Hit delete. And then I'm going to grab all these two in the back. The goal is to keep all the ones facing camera as clean as possible and get rid of any outliers out here that may be out in the distance. I'm just going to double check. I think I'm going to peek around the back here, and there's a couple that are hanging off. I'm just going to grab those, delete them as well. Okay, so we basically have a wall of data here that represents the leg's position. So I think this is going to work. In the camera tracker, let's go to the export tab. And we're going to open up the 3D scene transform, click unaligned, select all my points, and I'm going to go to origin and set from selection. So this will center our scene. And then what we can do now is hit export. So here's our footage. Here's the camera export we just created. Let's clean this up a little bit. I'm going to create an underlay. Hit F2. I'm going to call this tracking roto. And then I'm just going to put these nodes inside of that so it stay organized. Now we have our 3D camera here. We have a merge here. Let's go into this merge. Basically, it's the same scene, just with a grid. And we don't need the ground plane. We'll get rid of that. We have our point cloud here. And we have our camera tracker render, which is just the output. Let's look at our point cloud. I'm going to take it and hold shift to disconnect it from the merge. So we just have the point cloud all on its own. We're going to click make renderable. So this is now showing the whole bounding box of all of our points. And seeing as this is a large box, that must mean that we have one of our points must be really far out here in the distance. So this is most likely going to happen to you. And the way to fix that is we're going to go back into our camera tracker. We'll go to the merge 3D. We can see where all the dots are. I'm going to go into the camera tracker, and then I'm going to go to the options here and turn up the locator size to something very large. Let's try 50. So now we have this. This is essentially all of our dots almost looking like one. And then we're going to use that to find any other dots, and I can see some right here that are super far out in the distance. Actually, it's past the clipping point, but let's see if we can make that larger and find it. Set to 150. Holding Alt with the middle mouse button I'm rotating, I'm seeing there's one tracker out there. So I'll select that, delete it. That should clean up our track. So we can go back to our locator, set this back to the default size. And then I'm going to go into our export, and then I'm going to click Update Previous Export. So that should take our point cloud. Let's look at that now. That should update. And now when we select our point cloud, we don't have such a large box anymore. But also it's not oriented in the center. So let's go back to our camera tracker. Oh, it looks like we left this unaligned. So I'm actually going to select this, select all our points, set the origin, and then we'll go back to aligned. And that should put it back at the center of our grid, which is perfect. So now we can hit Update Previous Export. If we go to our point cloud now and view that and click on that, it's now at the center of our scene, and our bounding box is only around the points we need. So this is a perfect start. Takes some work to get there, some trial and error, but this is how you fix those things. So now I'm going to add a custom vertex. Okay, in the custom vertex 3D, I'm going to open up the vertex color here, and I'm going to change all of these to the position value. This is going to be PX, and then we're going to do PY, and then we're going to do PZ. So position X, position Y, and position Z. Okay, and then it's just adding that information in there. So after the custom vertex, again, in the point cloud, we're going to go and make sure that these are renderable. And then after the custom vertex, we are going to add a UV map 3D. View that, and you can see that we have our bounding box. Okay, this is our UV map. And what we're going to do here is we're going to leave this on planar. We're going to click Z, and then we're going to select fit. And now this is going to fit our box exactly around all the points that we have. And then we're going to throw this into a render 3D. And then we're going to change the software render to hardware UV renderer. Okay, so now we have some data showing up here. In our UV renderer, we're going to change the image. Instead of 1920 by 1080, we're going to make this 1080 by 1080 to give us a square UV. So this is what our UV map's looking like right now. We can go into our point cloud and we can change the size up to start filling this out. So I'm just going to aim to fill most of the gaps here. perfect. That'll work for now. I'm going to add a clean plate. And then I'm going to change it from color to ranges. And then I'm going to click fill. And I'm actually just going to leave it at that for now. I'm going to add this to displace 3D. Feed that in. And then I'm going to add an image plane. And that's going to feed into the displace as well. So now if we view this, we can see what it's doing. It is starting to warp. If you look at just the image, it's now displacing it based off of our point cloud data here. And in the image tab, we have this set to 10 subdivisions. It's displacing our data here. So in our displace, we're going to change this from Luma to RGB. And now it is displacing it in the correct position, in the correct direction at least. You can hit this tab here and it's going to give you some lighting and see what it's doing. Okay, we have a decent looking mesh here of just the leg. If we go into the image tab, we can turn this up. And then in the displace 3D, I'm going to change this to absolute. There we go. And that will fit the form of our leg so far. In the image plane, I'm going to add more subdivisions here. So I'm going to turn from 10, I'm going to turn this up to 32. It gives us more resolution of in the geometry, but it's looking pretty rough here. So now what we can do is after the clean plate, we can add a blur node. Just turn this up and it's going to start smoothing some of that out. So this is actually giving us pretty decent geometry from the leg. I'm going to turn this up a lot more just to really smooth it out. There you can kind of see how it indents into like the shin. So let's line these up now. This is going to pipe into the displace, is going to go into the merge. Look at that here. And then in the camera here, we're going to unlock it so you can make some changes. And go to the image, we can uncheck the image plane. And then we're going to enable camera projection. Okay, so now we have the image projecting onto the geometry that we've now made. We're going to change this from inside to height, and then uncheck on back faces. All right, we're getting somewhere. Now we can scrub through, and it's essentially stabilized our footage onto this model. And whatever we add on here now will act as like a perfect track. So it's almost like having a perfect clean plate of your footage, even though it's moving. Okay, so in our camera tracker here, we're going to change this from hardware renderer to hardware UV renderer. And then we're going to check lighting, and then we can see what's going on here. And because it's still 1920 by 1080, we're going to change this in the image size and just make it 1080 by 1080. So now we have perfectly stabilized footage into a little UV map, and now we can do some work on this. Okay, so now we're going to create replace material 3D. And we're going to take the displace and pipe that into the yellow. And then we're just going to take the camera tracker, put it into the green. This is going to re-add it back into our model. And then in the replace material, we're going to go to the material tab. And then we're going to add a new merge 3D node after. And we're going to take the camera projection that we're doing at the top of our flow and pipe it into the merge. And then hold Alt and we can drag this off so it doesn't cross over. So now we have our footage placed back on. And then after our merge, we're going to add another render 3D node. And now our footage is moving again. I'm going to take this and slide it over and make some room. So I'm going to create a regular merge node. And then I'm going to take our original footage, pipe it into it. And then I'm going to pipe our newest render 3D node back over the merge. So we've essentially, it's going to look like we've done nothing. But all the work that we've done over here means we can now add in anything we want between these two nodes, right? So I'll make some room. Give you an example. I'm just going to create a quick text node. Say leg. I'm going to create a merge node. We can view that here. Add this text over it. Scale it up. And you can see what it's doing here. It's being applied essentially on the 3D model. As you go right, it's going to wrap around. Go left, it's going to wrap. As you go up, you can see it's going to follow that model. So essentially just being reprojected over the model that we've made. So if we go place this here, you hit play, you've got a perfect track that's reprojecting onto the model. So we look at that here, that's what's happening. And then if this is too smooth now, what we can do, let's go into our blur and turn our blur down so it's at 100. Let's see what happens when we do 50. It's going to add more bumps and more ridges. So now we can see a lot more distortion on it. And then if I just go and take this and you can slide it around again, we can see exactly what it's doing as it moves across the projection. All right, so let's do a little bit of organization here. I'm going to create a new underlay, and I'm just going to hit F2, and we're going to call this point underscore cloud underscore model gen. So now we know that this section is all of the work we've done to project and reproject. And then here's where we're going to add anything we want in between these two nodes. And I'll show you how we're going to clean this up now. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go to the very first frame, and we are going to be on our camera tracker render here. It's going to be the 1080 by 1080 comp. I'm going to go to frame 1. So right click, save image. I'm going to save this as frame 1. And then I'm going to make sure this is a PNG, so none of the coloring changes. And then I'm going to go over to looking for the frame that has the most shadow coverage, and we're going to do essentially paint out twice, and then we're going to mask it in. So I'm going to go to about frame 63. And then I'm going to save this image as 63. Now I'm going to open up frame 1 in Affinity here. And we're going to use the tools in here to paint out this tattoo. I'm going to work with the inpainting tool here. So let's zoom in, open close brackets to scale our brush, and I'm going to start on the left and see what this can do. I'm just going to take on this section and see if it'll remove it. Not bad. I'm just going to go just piece by piece here to just work on keeping as much original skin tone as possible. Because you can see a lot of this tattoo is actually just a couple lines here. So if I can just get just the parts that have ink out, I can keep more of the original leg. This is a big chunk, so I'm just going to size the brush up and work on getting the whole thing here. Let's just work on this piece by piece here. We got a little good line there. It doubled up that, so we'll just get rid of that. Then I'm going to take this chunk, see if it could resolve it. I think there's going to be a bit of manual cleanup here after we use this to do kind of the broad strokes. Okay, so we got a lot of work here. This has kind of given us a little bit of a base to work on, so we can go in and kind of spot fix some of this stuff. You can see we have a lot of patching here where it's trying to fill in from using the image, so there's a lot of patterns here. We might be chasing our tail here with constantly doing inpainting, so let's go over to the clone tool, and we're going to do some manual stuff here. I'm going to scale up the brush. I'm going to source from the middle here. It's giving us a little bit of a preview. I'll source from down here. And let's go to our brush and soften it up a bit. Look up to our brush and turn this down so it's much softer. And then scale it up a bit. And then let's work on some of this here. Get rid of that color. And then I'm going to source from up here. At this point, I'm going to turn the opacity down too. So it's taking some color and leaving some that's right there. So it's going to just help muddy up a little bit of the texture duplication here. Source them down here. Paint out over there. I want to get rid of a lot of these little pink parts of the skin that it keeps duplicating. Okay, let's work with that for now. Just go ahead and file, export. Save it out as a PNG, 1080 by 1080. We'll call this Paintout. Okay, back in Fusion, let's bring in our Paintout and see what it's doing before we start working on the second one. So, like tattoo here, I'm going to take it and merge it over. View that. And this is on frame 1. So that should be what that looks like. Let's go ahead and give this a matte. Do a matte control. Make some room here. I'm going to take this and slide it over so we can kind of start working vertically. So yeah, matte control. I only want to keep like the main leg and then feather this in. So we're just going to take a polygon and I'm just going to draw a very rough garbage mask here. There might be a world where maybe we just isolate the paintout and not the whole leg, but let's see what this looks like. So drag it in, hold Alt, let go, and then go to your matte control and invert the garbage map. So make sure to uncheck this in case you decide to start moving it again. We're just going to drag this around. I'm going to add an extra point here. And then, yeah, just add a little bit of feathering to it. And then let's see what this looks like in our comp here. I'm just going to do a very quick flipbook. Left viewer. And then I'm just going to do preview and start render. Cool. Okay, let's go ahead and loop this and see what this looks like. So we can see what it's doing here. It's working quite well. If that shadow wasn't coming across, we might be able to get away with this just with one, but I think there's a world now where we can bring our second one in here and we can kind of recreate the shadow pass. So you can get an idea of what we're doing. We're essentially just putting this paint out back over, but since it's a perfect projection already, it lines up right away. And now we're going to work on doing a second pass with a shadow, and then we're going to merge the two. So we're kind of reintroducing the shadow back in. Cool. Go ahead and remove the preview. Okay, back into Affinity. We are going to we're going to open the shadow version on frame 63, and we're going to work on doing the same thing. So let's go to inpainting, and I'm going to start doing the exact same thing, just selecting the big blocks as needed. Cool. And then once I have these kind of bigger chunks taken out, let's go into the clone stamp tool. And this is still set to 25 opacity. And then I have the hardness turned almost all the way down. And then let's get rid of some of this kind of clone patchy. So I'm going to source here and just paint back over it. Source down here, get rid of that kind of dark stroke there. Same thing here. Go up here, get rid of that. And because the opacity is so low, you might just kind of keep building it up, keep clicking over it. Sourcing from the edge here, just to rebuild that. Source from down here, get rid of some of this darkness that's kind of coming through. There's a couple patches here that are standing out to me, so I'm going to work on that now. Okay, this should be pretty good. Let's go ahead and get this in our edit and see what it's looking like in Fusion. So I'm just going to export this as a PNG. Call this Paintout. Okay, back in Fusion. Let's bring the shadow clean plate in here. You can see that. And I'm just going to merge this over the top of our previous one because that's where we're going to do some of the compositing work. So we can see what happened there. And then let's do the same thing. Let's give this a mask as well. Just going to copy the matte control. And then I think I'll even copy this mask. And then if I need to tweak it, I can. Hold Alt, coverage mask. There we go. Now we can see what the merge of those looks like. So we have the bright version, and then we have the shadow pass version. So if we watch this now, let's go to our final render to see what that looks like. So now we have the shadow pass that kind of stays over. And I think on this, I'm going to take these and just move them all the way down to get the socks included. Let's add some big feather to it. Let's just RAM preview what the shadow pass now looks like. Cool, shadow pass looks like it's really, it's stuck on there pretty good. I think we can now work on blending the two. We can see the shadow that like creeps over the leg. I think we can work on masking it in and out and getting our two little paint out cleanups composited together. So let's look at our merge. And then I'm going to turn the blend down so we can see what's happening underneath it. And then as we scrub, we can see the shadow pass moving in, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mask on the merge that is just going to trace the shadow. Here's our merge. So right now the shadow's full up on all the time. So I'm actually going to go to frame 63, where we originally did our paint out. 63? Yeah, 63. And then I'm going to make a polygon here. And we know our mask traces along here. So I'm basically just going to mask right along here and draw it bigger than I need because I'm going to do a pretty big deep feather on it. Let's leave it as a hard mask for right now. We're going to mask that merge. And that is a keyframe set now. So now let's go watching up here. Let's go to where it just creeps off, which is basically frame 1. And then I'm going to take the whole mask and slide it over. So now we have something that follows very close to what the original did. And then we're going to do the same. So we have it animating in. And then it's going to animate back out. So right about there, it's back out again. So I'm going to take that, slide that back over. So let's make sure this is tracing. It's keeping the timing very well. So now I'm going to do a very big feather on it to match the same kind of fall off that it's doing. So let's go ahead and now turn this blend back up. And we have before, now we have after, and then let's just hit play and see how they look. Cool, let's see what they look like in final result now. I'm going to create a preview on the right viewer. All right, we are on to something now. I'm seeing some issues here, but it's perfect because we can just view this in context here. So we have this. Let me pull up the original clip over here. So if we scrub, we can see that the shadow is falling behind on our sock here a little bit. So that just means our mask. We just got to update our mask. Let's update that so that it follows. I also want to fix this little hard edge here, which I think we can get away with just feathering this original mask for here. I think that's what's happening, is we have like a hard edge here. So if I take this and Let me just make sure that our preview is gone now. Find that same frame. There we go, we got the hard mask. I'm gonna take this mask and soften it up, and that's gonna hide it more, perfect. And then let's find where our mask is falling behind, which is right about there. And that means it's this mask that's falling behind. It looks like it might just be because of the shape that it is. So let's go to the very first frame. I'm going to adjust this so that it stays more of like that, more of like a straight line. And then as it approaches, it's now keeping with the sock. But as we get to the sock, I'm also going to make sure it stays a straight line as well. So now it's moving in line, nice. And then it falls back about the same. Okay, I think that's going to work. Just make sure any of our edges aren't showing anything wrong here. Just make sure we watch this down a couple more times, anything kind of calling our attention. I do see a lot of noise here, that we do see some dancing noise, and we want to make sure that we do add that back, because since this is essentially a still frame, or a couple still frames put together, we want to make sure that this keeps some of that noise so it looks like it was shot. So let's clean up a little bit. Got an underlay. Rename this. We'll call this tattoo removal, and we'll even give it a different color here so it's easy to see. Perfect. And now that this is essentially our clean plate, we can now add something in between here, like maybe a new tattoo. Okay, so I got a new logo in here that has some line work we can add to it. So let's just merge it over the top, and we can see right there it's already dropping it in. And because this is a 1080 by 1080 comp and my image is not, I'm just going to add a transform, and then we can turn the aspect down to get close to what it should look like. So I'm just going to make it 0.6 in the aspect, and then we could scale it up a little bit bigger here, reposition it. Cool, that's a cool position. Okay, so I'm going to go to the merge, and I'm going to set this to multiply. It's going to get some texture through and pull the gain down just a little bit, and we can kind of see some skin beneath it. And I think the next thing I'm going to do is something we've done in the past where... A quick pause here. I'm cutting a part out. I initially used a color corrector node to help blend the tattoo. It ended up not working out, so I moved to using a Luma Keyer instead. I'm cutting out the work I did with the color corrector so you don't spend time following along just to have to delete the work anyways. So I'm giving you a heads up here that there's going to be a slight jump in the edit, and there's going to be a color corrector node that we have not previously mentioned that we delete once we set up the Luma Keyer. So sorry about that. I just wanted to make this a more efficient video and give you a heads up without having to just leave a bunch of work in that you won't have to do. So the tutorial is going to continue here. Do Luma key. See what that looks like. That's essentially it. Let's move that. Let's try inverting it. There we go. Now we're getting to something. Maybe that was our problem. Okay, let's get rid of the color corrector. We're going to keep the Luma Keyer. It's doing something cool with the leg texture. It's kind of adding some shine to it. But now let's kind of get... It's losing contrast here, so... Let's see if there's a world where... we can keep both of it. That's pretty cool. I'm going to create another merge. Actually, no. I'm going to copy this merge, and I'm going to paste it above. This is like our kind of texture keyer. I'm going to pipe in our tattoo again into it, but then I'm going to take the blend and turn it low but not off. And so that way it kind of keeps some of the original tattoo down there, but then as the light passes over, it's keeping some shadows. So that's looking pretty cool. I'm liking a lot of details. It has that distressed kind of tattoo look on it. And I like adding the double underneath it. It fills out the tattoo, so it doesn't feel like it's just a transfer mode. Let me loop this. Yeah, this is looking pretty cool. Showing comparatively what it was. This is a pre-solid setup, and the cool part is you can actually just take this and replace it because you've done the comp work here. We can replace this logo with anything, so let me go in here and just swap it out, and all of this compositing that's happening here on these nodes will just update. So if I was to go in here and bring in this YouTube logo as an alpha, I could literally just take this and then repipe it back in, and then I can go in here and just very quickly make a second version of this, scale it down, move it where I want it, and then it's updated without having to redo any of the work. But yeah, so let's just drop this back in, change that. I think the last couple things, I mean, this is a little bit of a crisp tattoo, so we can just go in here and add a super subtle blur. And honestly, 1, 2, or 3 might be fine. I think let's try 3, just to give it that distressed, non-perfect, faded kind of look that was on the original. Yeah, we have that kind of like, it's bled out a little bit over time. So we have that. Let's see if we can actually add a color corrector onto this and turn the contrast up. That's pretty nice. Contrast up, and then I think it is going a little bit too flat. So, let's go and bring the gamma up. Gamma's going to introduce a little bit more color that was in the graphics. That's kind of cool. Okay, so let's go over our node flow. Let's organize it first. Let's start there. So we have tattoo. This needs to get organized. So got an underlay. Hit F2. Call this tattoo. Make it something obvious that we can see later on, like blue or teal. Okay, so here's our whole kind of node flow here. So we have our regular footage, and what we did is we created a magic mask that rotated out the legs so that we can then send it to a matte that we then use as a matte for the camera track so that the track only tracks just the object that we want. We took the camera track and deleted all the extra points that we wouldn't need that went off into space. And when we exported the camera track, we used the point cloud, and then took the point cloud, used a custom vertex 3D, changed the colors based on their position using PX, PY, and PC. And then we output that to a UV WMAP 3D where we set the bounds to be planar, set to Z, and we used fit to lock our UV map to the only where the points are at. And then we sent that to a UV render 3D that now gives us our point cloud flattened out with the position data that we added from here. And we used a clean plate to fill the gaps. And then we blurred it out so that it would be a smoother displacement map for our image plane. So we used image plane that is displaced. And then we sent that into our original camera track, and we used the original, we used the camera to project the original footage back onto it. And then we sent that out as a renderer, a UV render, and we set it to 1080 by 1080. And then with that, we used that to be the base for our paintout work for removing the tattoo. And so what we did is we exported a still frame of frame 1 and a still frame of frame 63. One with the most light and then one with the most shadow. Then we went into Affinity to create the clean plate using the in-painting tool and the clone tool. And then what we did is we masked off certain selected pieces of these paintouts, and we animated a mask to animate them on and off according to how our footage is. And then that became the base of our composite, where we were able to take a new tattoo, add a little bit of blur, a little bit of color correction, sized it where we wanted it, placed it back over our new clean plate. And we did two versions of it. One of it is being affected by a luma keyer, which is fed off of our clean plate so that it introduces shadows and shine from the environment. And then we took our displace model and fed it into a replace material 3D so that it reprojects it from our flattened UV back onto our model. And then our footage is reprojected back on top of it. And then that is then sent out to a 3D render where the movement is then reapplied back onto it. And then that is just merged back over our original footage. Final thoughts on this. I think something we are missing here that we mentioned before is adding some film grain. So let's go ahead and add film grain to this paintout because it is a still frame. So we can go in here and add film grain. We can see what that's doing here. It's clearly way too high. I'm going to turn the strength down very low. I'm going to start turning it up till it's just visible. You just want some noise there, and that's a little bit too high. So, lastly, actually, I think I'm going to, since our composite is this, I'm actually going to add the film grain after we undo our animation, just so the film grain doesn't get warped going from a 1080 comp, 1080 by 1080 square comp back into our 16:9. So I'm gonna add the film grain down there. Yeah, just turn the film grain up just a little bit so we can start seeing it. Dial it back. Just want some kind of movement on there so it doesn't look so picture perfect. And that's it. Go ahead and send this to a saver node and then export out whatever file format you prefer. Just make this an MOV since it is an MOV. Change the format. Make sure it says .mov. And then go to format. H.264. We'll change this to ProRes, Apple ProRes 422 HQ. And that is it. Let's just go ahead and hit render.